Games Workshop, White Dwarf, Flashpoint Octarius. The galaxy is torn asunder, with new war zones exploding into life with ever-increasing frequency. In this series, we travel deep into the Ultima Segmentum to the beleaguered worlds of the Octarius sector, where something wholly alien is about to occur. Blood and snow. With the savage conflict between the Tyranids and Orks of Warzone Octarius spilling over into the Pancalis subsector, Space Marine chapters have raced to the region's aid. Among these are the Dark Krakens, an Ultima founding chapter descended from the Salamanders. A powerful assemblage of these warriors fight to defend the Banzir's hollow system against the Tyranid swarms. The Pancalis subsector borders the Octarian Empire, Orc-held space that has been fought over by greenskins and Tyranids for many years. A part of the Cordon Impenetra, established by Inquisitor Nashir Sahanson, the Pancalis subsector was in the midst of preparing for Xenos invasion when attacks came without warning. Now the Xenos have arrived, and they must be halted lest they break out of the Cordon Impenetra and push into Imperial systems beyond. The Cordon Impenetra. By luring a tendril of High Fleet Leviathan into the Orc-Octarian Empire, former Inquisitor Phidias Cryptman sought to have the two Xenos hordes destroy one another. However, his plan backfired. The Tyranids were fed with incalculable quantities of biomass and adapted to countless kinds of new and different threats. The huge scale of the conflict, which demands millions of Orc and Tyranid lives each day, drew in ramshackle greenskin fleets from light years around, and the Orcs themselves grew bigger on a diet of endless conflict. Many Imperial observers believed that it was only a matter of time until the roiling conflict spilled out into neighboring Imperial systems and inflicted untold damage. One of these was Inquisitor Nashir Sahanson, who devised what he called the Cordon Impenetra. Drawing a sphere around the outer reaches of the space fought over by the Orcs and Tyranids, he declared almost every Imperial world within the zone of demarcation lost, and he pushed hard for every subsector bordering the boundary to fortify itself and be reinforced. Many worlds joined the Cordon Impenetra, which both served as a man-made boundary and was the name given to a defensive organization made up of worlds along the border. As the worlds of the Cordon were reinforced, efforts were made by Imperial troops to destabilize the warring Xenos forces to ensure that neither concentrated their strength sufficiently to break through the Cordon. Ultimately, these actions proved to be in vain. The Dark Krakens. When the Pancalis subsector was attacked, every invaded system called for aid, and multiple forces responded. Deathwatch from the Eye of Octos Watch Fortress and warriors of the Wolfspear chapter were amongst the first to arrive. They were followed by a large strike force of warriors from the Dark Krakens chapter under the command of Chapter Master Mazonkai Reo. Reo dispatched warriors to all three planets in the Banzir's hollow system, tasking Captain Krigeni Luceor and the 5th Company with fighting Tyranids on the unusually named planet Death of Banzir. This frozen death world was the furthest planet in its system from its star. After arriving in Death of Banzir's orbit, Captain Luceor swiftly partook in a council of war with other Imperial commanders. It included battle leader Rakmare Bluewolf of the Wolfspear, Watchmaster Akrep Z of the Eye of Octos Deathwatch, and Lord Militant Arneld Highfast, commander of the Astra Militarum stationed on the planet. Before the Dark Krakens arrived, much had happened, and much had gone wrong. The Wolfspear had slaughtered a huge horde of Tyranids by causing an avalanche that drove all the creatures that survived into the Mirror Sea. However, the resulting tsunami destroyed the access point for the Prometheum rigs on the sea's bed. On the frozen Great Lakes of Peldathusa, thousands of locals had driven swarms of Tyranids onto the weakest part of the ice, sending countless Tyranids into the freezing water. Despite their apparent victory, many Tyranids survived, bursting out of the lakes and devouring the people who had orchestrated the trap. More mysteriously, troops from the Death of Banzir trackers militia had observed Tyranids stalking packs of Urson wolves in the Herdalo forests north of the world's equatorial permafrost. The wolves were highly intelligent, pack-hunting alpha predators with instinctive knowledge of the local terrain and where human settlements lay. Their genetic material would be of great value to the Hive fleet. Leaving 5 squads with his ships under the command of Captain Tallinn and Codicia Echo, Lucaor deployed the rest of his forces to the surface. His intention was to engage the Tyranids in the Herdalo forests, drive them from the area and therefore stop them from consuming the Urson wolves. Though it was an unorthodox mission for them to protect wild beasts, if the Tyranids wanted something, Lucaor was determined that they would not be successful. Success would also mean pushing the Xenos away from the world's methane pumps and relays. When additional reports warned of Tyranid monsters attacking the now isolated promethium extraction rigs beneath the Mirror Sea, Lucaor ordered Lexicanum Uari and Techmarine Eroan to aid in securing them. Death Watch kill teams deployed alongside them. Ekrep Zai of the Death Watch declared that he would aid the Dark Krakens personally in the forests, alongside several of his own kill teams. Lord General Militant Highfast also approved of the plan, committing dozens of Astra Militarum regiments to sweep the forest clear, while defense militia regiments increased their patrols around the permafrost industrial areas. The Imperial forces fighting in the forests faced harsh challenges from the outset. They had to scale treacherous cliff faces and wade through towering snowdrifts, all while at the mercy of the bitter cold. Soldiers plunged through broken ice into freezing pools, or were struck by heavy branches as they broke and fell beneath the weight of accumulated snow. This all meant little to the Dark Krakens. They had slain beasts 3 times their size on their homeworld of Noctis's ocean floor. On 100 or more battlefields, many had fought all manner of Xenos and abominations of the warp in the most grueling conditions imaginable. They had all the rugged determination, stubbornness, and resilience of their gene sire, and they put down any and all Tyranids they encountered. Most of their squads operating in loose skirmish formations. Incursors followed the barest tracks from both Xenos and Urson wolves alike, leading intercessors armed with stalker bolt rifles to dens and nests. Reaver squads rappelled over the most arduous terrain, whilst covered by the careful aim of Eliminator squads, who picked off beasts with perfectly aimed shots as Urson wolves or other predators attempted to intercept the maneuvering terror troops. This did not mean the fighting was straightforward. The Dark Krakens so admired the power of the Urson wolves that they endeavoured to shield them from the Tyranids, and even forbade Imperial Guardsmen from killing them, though some did so out of necessity. But the Urson wolves cared little for that fact, and they attacked Space Marines and Guardsmen alike to defend their territory as well as claim prey. Those with young fought especially viciously, and several Dark Krakens were severely wounded or even killed when these predators successfully isolated them and struck en masse. For the Tyranids' part, broods of Hormagaunts burst from piles of snow, savaging Imperial Guardsmen and bowling into Space Marines. Lictors emerged from hidden tunnels and cliff overhangs behind and amongst the Dark Krakens, inflicting many casualties before being brought down. Gargoyles hung perfectly still from the highest tree branches, only diving down to attack the Space Marines once the Adeptus Astartes had advanced past the trees they were hidden in. Dark Krakens and Tyranids fought bloody running battles through the forests, as the Xenos surged against spread-out Space Marine squads. The Xenos threatened to break through Imperial lines on multiple occasions, only to be stymied at significant loss. The campaign became increasingly protracted. The Urson wolves knew their territory well and fought ferociously to defend it. The Tyranids were equally unwilling to cede ground, launching countless raids and counterattacks that stalled the Imperial advance across the entire front. To force any advance at all in some areas against the aliens, Imperial forces called in continuous Aeronautica Imperialis bombing runs. Marauder bombers dropped countless tons of incendiaries and mole bombs that bored several meters down before detonating. There was no simple way to achieve victory, no single foe to slay that would signal the end. The campaign was pure attrition. Fresh waves of troops were sent behind the first to ensure that cleared areas remained clear. Whenever the Dark Krakens fought, the advance moved more quickly, the Space Marines slaughtering the toughest enemies and inspiring the exhausted troops who had become anxious and disquieted by the ever-present threat of ambush. The Space Marines were utterly resolute in their task. Just as stalking a megabasilosaur in the depths of the Kusomir Ocean required patience, this was no different. Success meant outlasting their foe and meeting its displays of strength with even greater might of their own. The Dark Krakens were an adamantine tide wall against a ship-breaking storm. They threw back the beast surge on the Glornhill Valley, emerging bloody but victorious after the night of 100 horrors, and held the line after 5 companies of the 602nd Tuscan Snowhounds vanished without a trace. Even as the Space Marines' casualties mounted, they did not waver, spurred by the fiery zeal of Reclusiarch Zitaden. It was many months before the first Imperial forces reached the forest's northern boundaries, having finally pushed the Tyranids out. It required more than 4 dozen regiments of Astromilitarum and the combined efforts of the better part of a Dark Kraken's battle company and several Deathwatch kill teams. Even then, some forces fighting in other parts of the forest still had much further to advance, their progress hampered by harsh terrain and vicious fighting. Lucio would only declare the mission complete when every Tyranid was driven from the forest. He was drawn away before he could. Word came from Deathwatch kill teams elsewhere on the planet. A huge Tyranid swarm was descending on the half-complete Glacial X, a colossal fortress under construction by the Adeptus Mechanicus, close to several of the planet's larger population centers. Akrep immediately pulled his forces from the Heraldo forests. Knowing the strategic importance of the citadel, Lucio deployed some of his warriors to defend it, joining them himself. Gloom Walkers. Deep beneath the Mirror Sea, Space Marines of the Dark Krakens chapter make slow progress towards their objective. The denizens of the deep watch them hungrily, for there are new predators in the ocean that consume all in their path. Even with the enhanced auto-sensors built into his helmet and the augmented vision of a Space Marine, Lexicanum Uari could barely see a thing advancing along the bed of the Mirror Sea. Visibility was reduced to a few meters. All he could make out in the environment were small rocks, ugly diminutive animals, and the sand puffing up from the ground as he stepped his armored boots forward. The only things clearly distinguishable in the endless gloom were the bioluminescent symbols painted on his armor and that of his fellow Dark Krakens. The chapter's colors of black and deep purple made the warriors almost invisible in this darkness, but the many symbols daubed on their armor glowed all the brighter. He identified Tekmarine Eroan by the images of stylized ammonites that were part cog. He identified Sergeant Mohikai by the hammerhead symbol painted on the back of his right leg and left knee plate. Both bore many more images than these, and Sergeant Mohikai wore more than any other battle brother in his squad. Even with his power armor compensating for it, Uari still felt cold through his augmented bones. Though he could smell the recycled air within his armor, he could not entirely filter out the salty tang of the water. Though there was little Uari could see, he could hear much more. The closest was the gentle thump of his battle brother's steps. From further away came the keening calls of the creatures of the Mirror Sea. Thanks to his affinity with wild beasts, Uari could decipher mourning cries for missing mates, aggressive territorial claims, and the tactical chatter of pack-hunting sea creatures. To anyone else listening, they were little more than snarls and long-noted songs. Uari's limbs were heavy in the water due to the crushing pressure of the sea. A handful of amber warning runes for external oxygen and his atmopressure augury shimmered in the peripheral of his auto-senses. Uari, Eroan, and the heavy intercessor squad of Sergeant Mohikai advanced slowly to a large promethium extraction hub set onto the seabed. Its surface-based access points had been destroyed when warriors of the Wolf Spear chapter caused an avalanche that plunged into the Mirror Sea, which in turn caused a tsunami that tore over a great swathe of the sea's surface. How far are we from the hub? Uri projected into Sergeant Mohikai's mind. 300 meters. It could have been 1,000 miles based on the sheer blackness of the deep Uri could see. And there has been no contact from it? None, Lexiconum. Not even from Kill Team Galliel. The Dark Krakens knew the Death Watch had already deployed to the hub and planned to link up with them once they were inside. Their progress was slow. Every step and gesture the Dark Krakens made in the deep water appeared as if it was happening in slow motion. They advanced in a circle formation, with those at the rear walking backwards. In this kind of terrain, the Dark Kraken's incredibly high reactions would be tempered by the water. The Space Marines had to be skilled in predicting where attacks would come from, so they could react in time. With each warrior in the formation given a strict sector to cover, they could be confident that an attack from any direction could be met in time. Though the Dark Krakens carried auspexes, it was impossible to tell if a creature found on it was hostile or otherwise. The Dark Krakens had made themselves experts in fighting on seabeds, but they all acknowledged that this was not their home. It was that of the predators who dwelled there, which had millions of years of evolution to perfect them for it. Uri heard different sounds. He heard the creature's fear, pain, anger, bloodlust. He felt a change in the water flow. It moved against him at speed in a different direction to the current. There were creatures not far away, spearing through the water. "That one was close," said Brother Aronas. "What was it?" asked Uri. "Eel of some kind, 5 meters long, jaws large enough to wrap around one of my greaves. Brushed past, threat non-immediate." "It was probing," said Uri. More creatures drew closer to the Dark Krakens now. Uri could not just hear them, he could feel them. Many were curious about the strange beings that invaded their domain. All were hungry. That was a given for monsters of the Gloom. Most were wary, but some were hungrier and more daring than the others. Sudden movements in the water and the feeling of a determination to kill caused Uri to stop. "One of them is coming." He closed his eyes and reached out psychically for the creature's mind. He found it. It was powerfully aggressive, steeped in an insatiable desire for blood and meat. It was a dominant creature, a king in these waters. It was only 10 seconds away from him. Uri battled for control of its mind. He thrust his will like a blade into the crimson maelstrom of its thoughts to sever the beast's intentions. He attacked them over and over, trying to force his way through. The beast's hunger was almost implacable. The creature was 5 seconds away. Uri gritted his teeth, grunting with effort. Blood dripped from his nose. Finally, he forced a breach in the animal's mental wall. He bore through it, smashing it wide with psychic power. When the beast turned away at Uri's behest, it was so close that it was low enough for the Space Marines' heads to reach up and touch. Uri looked up. It was the size of a Thunderhawk gunship. Brother Oengir let out a low whistle over the Vox. Uri panted with exhaustion. When he sensed another creature coming in for the attack, Uri knew he lacked the mental strength now to stop it psychically. Raising his hands, he parted the water around the animal, and it flopped to the soggy sea bed, convulsing in confusion and terror, as suddenly it was out of water. A Dark Kraken fired a burst of Hellstorm bolt rifle fire. The normally booming thumps were muffled by the sea, and the bolts drove through the water like miniature torpedoes. They continued on their path into the writhing body of the beast and detonated in an explosion of gore. Uri immediately let the waters enfold its shredded flesh. "I'm sorry, noble creature," thought Uri. He never wished death on any beast like this. He was glad it was too dark to see the slain animal. "It is a tragedy that you should have to fall in such a manner," thought Uri. "But just as I cannot take your life, you cannot take mine or my brother's." For all that, He could not help but admire the tech marine's skill in fashioning bolt rounds that were so effective beneath the waves. Another creature surged towards the Dark Krakens. Yuarai could tell it was a large brute, larger than the monster he had driven away earlier. As quickly as it charged, it turned away. He sensed suddenly its wash of fear. Strange. Brothers, be aware. A very powerful creature has been scared away by something, and it was not any of us. We have 200 meters left to advance, brothers, said Mohikai. Multiple aspects readings, said Brother Kawarahai. Stay alert, but do not slow down, replied Mohikai. Seconds later, Yuarai saw some of his battle brothers fire, as well as the bubble trails of unleashed bolts. Tyranids! Shouted Brother Kawarai. Scores! Followed Brother Oengir. Why can't I sense them? Thought Yuarai. He had no idea the Xenos were attacking, but he tried to reach out through the deep to find them and where they might be coming from. He felt blocks and barriers. Are these the delicate actions of intelligence, or merely a natural part of their biology? The only way Yuarai knew the Tyranids were there was because Mahakai's squad were firing at them. He saw the creatures in the light of the bolter's strobing muzzle flare. They were like hormigons, only their rear legs were fused together into fins. Though he could not see it, he knew gore and viscera would be filling the water all around them, attracting all manner of creatures. At least they will attack the Xenos and not us, he thought. The numbers are increasing, said Brother Oengir. Keep advancing. We are the Dark Krakens, as inexorable as the tide itself, roared Sergeant Mohikai. As the waves shape the shore, endurance shapes us. Yuarai ignited his force sword, Night Claimer. The blade rippled with azure energy, which caused the water around it to fizz and bubble. An eel-like Tyranid whose maw made up more than half its body length rushed at Yuarai out of the darkness. With a gesture of his free hand, Yuarai increased the pressure of the water around the creature to crush it. He heard bones crack and saw ichor pour out of dozens of wounds. The creature drifted to the ground, dead. Another attacked. Yuarai pulled all of the fluids out of the creature, leaving it a husk of dust slowly crumbling apart in the sea's currents. 100 meters, brothers, said Sergeant Mohikai. He maintained strong tactical focus, thought Yuarai. A fine leader. Mohikai was not swept up by bloodlust or distracted from the mission. The Dark Kraken's gunfire only increased in volume as Battle Brothers fired burst after burst from their Hellstorm bolt rifles. Some of the warriors, Yuarai could tell from the ceaseless muffled chugging, were firing on full automatic against swarms of Xenos. Every sector of the Dark Kraken circle was under attack. Battle Brothers at the rear of the formation fired as they walked backwards, trusting in those at the front to clear the way. Soon, Yuarai's vision was filled with the sight of shredded Tyranid corpses, their remains floating with the current or sinking to the sea floor. The braver creatures of the Mirror Sea approached the Xenos flesh after the briefest investigation, or swam away quickly. Even the most ravenous predators and desperate scavengers reject that flesh. It is so alien, Yuarai thought. There was a roar of pain. Brother Oengir. Yuarai looked over to him. Bubbles rushed out of his armor. He is pierced. Oengir was as good as dead, as pressurized air poured out of his otherwise contained suit of armor. The evacuating air would keep much of the water out for now, but once it stopped, Oengir's suit would flood. Even if they could reach the Prometheum hub quickly enough, the failure of the pressure containment would make it impossible to get Oengir to the surface without causing catastrophic harm. Oengir poured fire into the Tyranids around him. Yes, brother, fight! Take them with you, Yuarai said to him. While the rest of the Dark Krakens kept moving and tightening the circle, Oengir held his position, covering the advance of his brothers. Beautiful, Yuarai thought. With a flick of his wrist, Yuarai broke the neck of an aquatic hormigaunt racing towards him. In a single fluid motion, he brought up Night Claimer through the throat of another. This was how deep-sea war was fought. Warriors had to anticipate the enemy's movements and allow for the inertia caused by the water before striking accordingly. He kept pace with the rest of the squad. With a quick glance behind him, he saw Oengir finally succumb to his wounds and the damage his armor had sustained. The warrior had sunk to the sea floor. "I will not leave you here, brother." Warai sheathed Nightclaimer, raising both hands. He grunted as he channeled his mental strength into lifting Oengir's armored body. Small animals that had already started climbing over it scattered as their feast was lifted off the seabed. The corpse drifted through the water towards the center of the Dark Kraken's fighting formation. "Form up around me, brothers. I cannot fight and hold Oengir at the same time." Uarai walked into the center of the circle, teeth gritted and head pounding, gliding Oengir's body in position next to him. Uarai took a deep breath. Keeping the body up next to him was less taxing than reeling him in had been. Looking around, Uarai saw the Dark Krakens were holding well against the Xenos attackers, keeping them at a distance and inflicting dozens of casualties with disciplined sector watching and controlled fire. "We endure." Out of the corner of his eye, Uarai saw a disturbance in the sea floor behind the feet of "Rahati!" he roared, too late. A ravener burst out of sand. It wriggled free of the soft ground with powerful thrusts of its long, snake-like body, which had narrow fins running along the length of it. Plumes of dust came up from the floor with it, creating a tempest of sand and wicked claws. In a pair of swift motions, it brought its blade arms down into Brother Rahati's back. The warrior screamed. The creature had barely pulled its claws from Rahati's body when Sergeant Mohikai put a burst of fire into its torso, ripping it apart. Uarai released Oengir's corpse and increased the water pressure to such an extent around the Ravener that it crushed its head. It had been a short distraction, but it had been enough to break the formation, and this the Tyranids could exploit. The Xenos gathered in a dark mass all about the Dark Krakens, half visible in the gloom. Their eyes and fangs flashed as they thrashed forwards in an overwhelming mass to finish the Space Marines off before they could reach Sanctuary. "Hold them, brothers! 25 meters!" roared Mohikai. The dark was so impenetrable that even at this distance, the Promethium extraction hub was invisible. It was as if they had made no progress at all from where they had started. Uarai was powerless against the incoming Tyranids. He needed all his strength to keep the bodies of Oengir and Rahati moving at the center of the Dark Kraken's formation. He saw as the Tyranids closed in. Even if he stopped to intervene, to fight to protect his battle brothers, it would only slow them all down. The Tyranids were growing more and more numerous as they sensed the Space Marines' vulnerability. To slow is to die. Uarai watched another Ravener emerge from the gloom, its razor-toothed maw lit by the flashes of firing Hellstorm bolt rifles. He saw it as it lunged for Sergeant Mohikai. He saw its head blown apart by a round that did not come from the Dark Krakens. "This is Sergeant Galliel of the Eye of Octos Death Watch. We have you under our cover. Welcome to Promethium Hub 17PZ5. Let us purge these abominations together." Blood and Snow, Part 2. The galaxy is being torn asunder, with new war zones exploding into life with ever-increasing frequency. The Adeptus Mechanicus have plans to build a mighty fortress on the planet known as Death of Banzir. The Tyranids reckon otherwise. The Adeptus Mechanicus were constructing a colossal fortress called the Glacialix on the world of Death of Banzir to help protect the planet and its people against alien invasions. The Tyranids invaded before the citadel could be completed. Now great swarms of the Xenos descended upon the half-built fortress. Akrep Z, commander of the Death Watch on Death of Banzir, has redeployed much of his strength to defend the incomplete bastion, determined it would not fall to the enemy. Akrep Z and his strike force, made up warriors from Watch Companies Primus and Quintus of the Eye of Octos, raced to the Glacialix as quickly as possible. Flying over the fortress in his dropship, Z observed how defensible the in-progress bastion was. The Adeptus Mechanicus had been building it into and on top of the Paglaces glacier, which towered over much of the surrounding area. Z could see streams of refugees heading past the citadel and on towards a port settlement that bordered a lake. This was Moiken, a Piscid harvesting centre and one of the largest population zones on Death of Banzir. The people were fleeing from the horde of Tyranids that was heading towards the glaciales. These same Tyranids had survived a trap set up by locals that sent many of their number crashing into the frozen Great Lakes of Pelthadusa, and now they were rampaging unchecked, consuming outnumbered militia units and overrunning villages and settlements. The glaciales was far from complete. Many of the battlements lacked crenellations, and most of the towers were still surrounded by scaffolding. Thousands of servitors and local labourers toiled relentlessly. Sparks flew from countless points as the workers welded slabs of metal, fitted gantries, and constructed barracks and armories. Temporary camps and hangar bays had been established all over the area for Adeptus Mechanicus, Imperial Guard, and Aeronautica Imperialis forces. The number of people here was surely in the hundreds of thousands, if not more. With the Tyranids barely days away, there was no hope that a full evacuation could be completed in time. To make a stand. Tech Priest Dominus Mu Artek Ro would never have considered evacuation in any case. Single-minded and focused, even for those of his own kind, he refused to countenance the possibility of abandoning his work. Ro had invested months of time and committed tens of thousands of assets. He had found the best location for the world's first fortress, expending vast resources which would be wasted. He argued that, if they were to pull back and later be forced to retake it, then that task would be even more difficult than making a stand here and now. Ro argued that the fortress, even incomplete as it was, would serve as a great anvil upon which to break the Tyranid hordes, and that this was not an impending disaster as Z thought it was, but rather a golden opportunity to annihilate vast numbers of the Xenos. Z found he could not disagree. The Tyranids were numerous enough that trying to stop them in the open field was not an option. Due to the proximity of Moiken and other townships, the hope of stringing the Tyranids out in running battles and trying to break their cohesion was also not tactically viable. He too concluded the Imperial forces needed to make a stand around Glacialix, though doubts nagged at him that they would have enough troops to stand firm. Imperial forces prepared to dig in. Z ordered that as many civilians as possible be evacuated, despite the fact that most would not be able to leave in time. Should the battle go against them, at least some citizens might escape, and the Tyranids would be denied their biomass. The people left their homes and possessions, braving the harsh elements. Captain Lucior of the Dark Krakens deployed his warriors to guard Moiken and also the citizens' evacuation route, declaring his warriors would shield the people from any Xenos that dared strike at them. Z realized that if Imperial forces were to stand against the Tyranids, they would need to slow the horde's advance. This would allow time for more of the fortress to be completed, regiments to be deployed, trenches to be dug, wire to be placed, mines to be laid, and bunkers to be constructed. Ever the warriors to lead preemptive assaults from the front, Z prepared his Space Marines for a series of strikes against the oncoming Tyranid horde. Their objective was to launch distraction attacks to draw elements of the megaswarm away from the others, inflict losses, and slow the advance of the horde. Kill Team Tellura fought a hit-and-run campaign in the Yaruga Fjord, leading hundreds of Tyranids into dense terrain where their numbers worked against them. Kill Team Cyprus drew hundreds of Tyranids into an amphitheater-shaped basin, where Archaeopter Fusiliers pounded the Xenos in a series of bombing raids, which saw all but a handful of the Tyranids slain. Kill Team Cadrael established sniper positions from which they targeted Synapse creatures, claiming no fewer than 23 kills. Despite these successes, the losses the Tyranids suffered were but a few squalls of snow in a blizzard. The Death Watch were not alone in carrying out daring raids. Aeronautica Imperialis squadrons launched sortie after sortie to control the skies. Fighters hosed the Tyranid throngs with fire, while bombers unleashed their destructive payloads on them. Archaeopter flights joined them, adding their own considerable firepower and fighting hard to prevent Tyranid dominance in the air. Squads of Sicarians and kill teams of Skitarii performed their own raids, ambushes and assassination missions, many selling their lives dearly to stall the alien onslaught. The wolf spear of battle leader Rakmir Bluewolf also arrived. The Wolfguard veteran committed much of his strength to the effort to slow and distract the Tyranid horde. His warriors utilized their pack-hunting tactics to stalk Synapse creatures, cut off vanguard swarms from the rest of the horde, and launch hit-and-run attacks against its rearguard. When suddenly the wolf spear vanished, Z did not mourn their disappearance. He had seen their actions around the Mirror Sea largely as a failure. He saw their apparent loss here as just one more. He had never factored their presence into his original plans, and so his strategy was unaffected. For all the Imperial forces' efforts, however, for all the death they inflicted, for all the time they bought, the Tyranids were inexorable. As the Tyranids drew close to the glacialics, Z ordered the withdrawal of all troops to the main Imperial front lines. The true battle was about to begin. The attack begins. It fell to the macroclades of Mu'artek Row and regiments of Lord General Militant Arneld Highfast to hold the line against the onrushing Tyranids, which began their assault with waves of Hormgaunts and Termagants. Thousands were thrown into the air and torn apart in minefields, but these losses were of little consequence to the Xenos horde. Mechanicus and Astra Militarum troops manned several rows of reinforced trench lines, set up bunkers to allow troops to establish murderous enfilades of fire and garrison the functional elements of the glacialics. The fortress had been turned into a warren of choke points to make it a death trap for Tyranid swarms that got inside, and it was manned by artillery regiments so they could pour fire on the aliens from above. The battle soon became a meat grinder, where the single-minded alien fury of the Tyranids slammed into the cold, obsessive logic of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the faith of the Astra Militarum. Hydra flak tanks of the 422nd Hyanese long guns filled the air with storms of lead to throw back sky-darkening swarms of winged bioforms. Wyverns of the Korskan 9th Artillery Regiment exchanged explosive salvos with broods of Tyranid artillery beasts. Sacks of acid exploded around artillery tanks, sending corrosive liquid into their cramped interiors to burn the troops to an agonizing death. Detonations rippled amongst the Tyranid gun creatures, blowing them apart and sending gore and meat chunks in all directions. On the front lines, guardsmen were eaten inside out by carnivorous beetles and larvae, whilst wave after wave of Tyranids were gunned down by endless torrents of las, radium, phosphor, autocannon, and heavy bolter fire. Z and the Death Watch went wherever they were most needed. Where it appeared a section of trench would be overwhelmed, Space Marines would leap from their transports, unleash a storm of devastating firepower to push the onrushing Tyranids back, then pull out. Z's kill teams picked off broods of concealed artillery beasts and reclaimed lost bunkers. Rose Cavalry, Dragoons and Ballistarii launched flanking and counterattacks of their own, looking to plug gaps or relieve pressure on the most vulnerable sections of the line. Casualties mounted on both sides. Imperial and Mechanicus forces found their wider lines harder to hold, and more sectors threatened to buckle under the strain of Tyranid attacks. With each passing minute, more and more wounded Bjornian snow raiders, Truscan snowhounds, and Varsian ice rangers and troops from other worlds streamed to the rear lines. The only respite for the defenders was the sheer number of Tyranid dead, which were piled so high it drove the bulk of the Tyranid onslaught to an almost complete standstill. This gave the defenders precious time to withdraw to new lines of defense. Not every unit was successful, however. Broods of carnifexes and other large and brutish monsters barreled through the enormous mounds of corpses, forcing paths through. In their wake came fresh tides of bio-horrors, which consumed many of the troops too slow in their retreat. The fighting continued in this fashion for days on end. Every Tyranid attack probed, tested, and threatened to overwhelm the defenses. Carnifexes smashed through barricades like living battering rams. Bio-titans unleashed fire on half-built towers, collapsing them. Burrowing bioterrors burst up into trench lines, scything through terrified soldiers. With each wave, the Xenos gained more ground. The loss of every single Skitarii, Astra Militarum trooper, or Space Marine was irreplaceable. General Highfast pressed many of the locals into service, issuing them with lasguns and shoving them into the front line. Though they were hardy and faithful people, none had the training of soldiers, and none had seen anything like the Tyranids before. To Akrep Z, the Imperial forces were losing. Though they had inflicted horrific damage to the Tyranid horde, and the air was filled with the stench of hundreds of thousands of alien corpses, he could not see it being enough. The Dark Krakens reported finding more and more Astra Militarum deserters on Moikan's outskirts as despair spread and hope was lost. Supplies of all kinds were running low. Wenro reported gene stealers had somehow infiltrated the Glacialix itself and were slaughtering their way through the garrison, as he was convinced they now faced defeat. Regardless, he gathered all his surviving warriors and led them into the citadel in an attempt to wipe the Xenos out. He told Captain Lucaer to evacuate the remaining citizens and protect them. In response, Lucaer said nothing, instead sending warriors of his own to aid the Watchmaster. To fight within the Glacialix was grueling. Behind every door and around every corner lurked lightning-fast Xenos intent on slaughtering any they encountered. The bloody remains of Skitarii and guardsmen were everywhere, and Deathwatch and Dark Kraken alike shed blood together as they battled to take full control of the fortress. If they failed, the Imperial forces would have been outflanked and would have suffered hideous losses. Additionally, the bulk of the Imperial forces' artillery support was stationed in the fortress to gain the advantage of its high ground. If they were overrun, the army would truly be doomed. After driving his Vigil spear through yet another gene stealer in a Xenos ambush, an exhausted Z felt a terrible tremor beneath his feet. Around him, his warriors were shaking. It felt like an almighty earthquake. Without warning, he received word from battle leader Blue Wolf. The Wolfspear veteran was neither lost nor dead. He and his battle brothers had discovered old and exceedingly deep mining tunnels beneath the Tyranid horde. The Wolfspear had spent days rigging them with all of the explosives they could find before finally detonating them. Explosions billowed up from below the Xenos, immolating swarms of weapon beasts. Bio-titans fell into deep pits, enormous chunks of rock landing on top of them and crushing them. Bioforms, desperately seeking to escape, pulled others into the inferno with them. The tremendous act undoubtedly had turned the battle in the Imperium's favor. It is said that Z laughed with relief before urging his warriors on. Zeno Purge. Kill Team Galiel of the Death Watch and a squad of heavy intercessors from the Dark Krakens chapter face a gene sealer attack on Prometheum Hub 17PZ5. They must eradicate the alien menace threatening the underwater facility, but their foe is cunning. Water flowed off Deathwatch Sergeant Galiel's armor as he waded backwards out of the ice-cold water of the Mirror Sea. By some quirk of physics, the pressure inside the Prometheum extraction hub kept the water from flooding the entire structure. Galiel fired his bolt pistol into a mass of thrashing and slashing Tyranids, following him in from the deep, blowing out crania and disemboweling creatures with every shot. Gorafen and Rahael of the Salamanders and Blood Angels respectively appeared at his side. They each leveled a shotgun at the gnashing beasts that tumbled over each other to get at Galiel. They fired again and again. Bioforms were shredded to ribbons by crypto-clear rounds and Xeno-purged slugs, staining the water black with spilled ichor. The Space Marines were spattered with gore. The two Deathwatch veterans followed up their vicious strike with a pair of frag grenades. They threw them into the hole rent in the side of the structure where the Tyranids were coming from. Great plumes of water erupted, along with yet more Xenos body parts and ichor. No more aliens followed. "That seems to be the last of them," said Goraven. "For now," said Galliel. "More will come. We will leave this chamber, seal the door behind us." "Yes, Sergeant." With battle over, Galliel turned to his kill team's guests. The Dark Krakens had been en route to join Galliel's kill team, advancing along the Mirror Sea's floor when they had been attacked by the Tyranids. The Death Watch had come to their aid, slaughtering the predacious Xenos in droves, and buying time for the Dark Krakens to reach the relative sanctuary of the extraction hub. Water streamed from their heavy Gravis armor. They had brought with them the bodies of their 2 dead. "I am sorry for your losses," Galliel said to them. "I am Sergeant Galliel of the Eye of Octos Death Watch, formerly of the Dark Angels." "Gratitude, Son of the Rock," said one, "for your timely intervention." Galliel presumed this one was the squad's leader. "I am Sergeant Mohikai of the Dark Krakens. This is Lexicanum Uarai." The Space Marine gestured to a warrior next to him, who was wearing a psychic hood and bore a foresword at his side. The librarian nodded in acknowledgement. The Psyker's armor shared much of the black and deep purple of his chapter's brethren, but the armor of his sword arm was the cerulean typically worn by Space Marine librarians. Though the warrior was helmed, his exhaustion was apparent in his posture. "He has fought hard." There was much more to the appearance of these Dark Krakens than the colour of their armour. Galliel had never set eyes on them before. Many wore necklaces of animal teeth or wore parts of scaled sea creatures' skins. He could see faint outlines of images of skulls and ocean beasts etched or daubed on their armour. These images glowed on the warriors stood in the shadows. Not unlike the Space Wars in a way, he thought, regarding the Dark Kraken's fetishes. He was pleased these warriors didn't exhibit the raucousness of the scions of Ras. "With me, Sergeant Mohikai," Galliel said. "There is much to be done." "We are overstretched here," said Galliel, advancing through the extraction hub's corridors with Mohikai beside him. Behind him were Captain Caladir and Codicia Leoel of the Death Watch and Lexicanum Uarai. The Dark Krakens carried their dead in the middle of the column, with the remaining Death Watch veterans bringing up the rear. Should anything attempt to attack the Space Marines there, they would have to get past the Thunderhammer and Storm Shield of brother Zorik of the Subjugators. Clad in Terminator armor, he was indomitable. "Tyranids are here in great numbers, and this hub is large. My warriors and I will sweep an area clear, go to another, and find the area we have purged is tainted again. We have managed to secure hundreds of workers and servitors who are vital to this facility's ongoing usefulness in the central command chambers. They are safe there for now, with Celedris of the Hawklords, Maragesh of the Tiger's Argent, and Henlak of the Mantis Warriors protecting them. But we need to restore real contact with the surface, and we cannot do that whilst protecting the workers. With you here, we believe we can do both." "What varieties of Tyranids have you encountered here, Sergeant?" asked Mohikai. "Almost exclusively gene stealers," said Galliel. "Understood," said Mohikai gravely. "The Dark Krakens are willing to aid in any way necessary. My warriors can guard or purge with equal tenacity." "Good," thought Galliel. "You have fought well to get here. You have suffered. Guard the people and your dead. My warriors and I know these corridors now. We have the ambush sites, we know our way around. We will secure the Aqua Shuttle Bay. With the vehicles there, the servitors and workers can reach the damaged surface access routes. It will also give a means for more troops to be brought in to sweep the entire complex clear." "A sound plan," said Mohikai. "I would offer our assistance to you. I can spare warriors." It took little imagination on Galliel's part to see the value in having extra bodies, especially heavy intercessors. "That would be welcome," he said. "Brothers Patara and Sushana will join you," said Mohikai. "They are fine warriors, inexorable as the tide. I place them under your command. They will not fail you." The creature was squeezed between two walls of metal. It had turned its bulbous head sideways to fit. Its 6 arms and legs were spread wide, pressing against each of the walls to pin the creature in place. It heard deep voices, made scratchy and metallic by vox grills. It heard the stomping of heavy boots upon decking. It felt the probing of a powerful mind, which never found the creature. The beast heard much. It heard plans and schemes, things the others of its kind should know. It waited for minutes after it heard the final boot step, before the armored beings were far enough away to leave its hiding place. It shuffled slowly out of its position, its powerful muscles taut, reaching a grate in the wall behind it. It stopped, its senses straining to detect life. It could hear nothing. It could see nothing. It was safe. Carefully, the creature pushed the grating away with its claws and slid out of the crevice. It ran. It ran to the rest of its brood. "We will head to the Aqua Shuttle Bay in 2 groups," said Glacial to the Space Marines, all of whom were gathered now at the command chambers. They were in a room sequestered from the civilians. It was unremarkable, containing little more than control panels and operators' desks. "Captain Kaladir, Graven, Muragesh, and Henlak will join me, along with Brother Patara of the Dark Krakens. Codicea IOL will lead the 2nd squad, which will include Teobal, Rahel, Zorik, and Saledris. They will be joined by Brother Sushana of the Dark Krakens. My team will take the northeastern route, IOL's the southeastern. This should split the Tyranids and make it harder for them to calculate our mission. Sergeant Mohikai and the remaining Dark Krakens will guard the civilians here. We will inform the people of this before we depart." Mohikai nodded in acknowledgement. "Any questions?" None responded. "Emperor be with us all." The Space Marines marched out past the huddled civilians. The civilians were hungry, scared, and cold. Their eyes widened with greater fear when they saw the Dark Krakens, who were much larger than most of the Death Watch in their heavy suits of armor. Glacial stopped before them. Mohikai stood next to him, towering above him. The Dark Kraken had taken off his helmet. His face was pale, like one who spent their entire existence in darkness. His head was shaved. He knows that showing his face will help win them to him, thought Glacial. More surprising is that he cares to do so. "My warriors and I are leaving for a mission," said Glacial. "One that should change everything for us and bring vital relief. Sergeant Mohikai here is of the Dark Kraken Space Marine chapter. He and some of his warriors will stand guard over you, keeping you safe from the Xenos." "We will let no alien past us," said Mohikai. "You have my word as a member of the Adeptus Astartes and a servant of the Emperor." He really means it, thought Glacial. Many Space Marines saw defending civilians as merely another way to kill humanity's foes. The Dark Krakens, or at least this one, clearly saw it as a valid duty in its own right. Scions of Vulcan to be sure, he thought. With no more words to be said, Glacial and his warriors left. "I was unaware the Salamanders had successors," said Goraven. "We of the Eye of Octos have spent much time fighting in enemy-held territory. Not much news of the wider galaxy reaches us." "There are many through the Ultima founding," said Patara. "More than I can name. I know of the Dragon Spears and of the Iron Drakes. No others, however. We have been given little information in that regard." "For millennia we were alone," mused Goraven. "No longer. You have much catching up to do, little brother." His words were not lacking in humor. "I am not one to doubt there is much to learn from the old and grey," said Patara. "I hope you are not too senile." Goraven laughed. "It has been many years since I have had an apprentice," said Goraven, "but if you watch closely, I will teach you much about killing the Emperor's enemies. There will be many opportunities before this day is done." "I look forward to it." "Focus," hissed Glacial. Neither sign of Vulcan spoke much after that. Not that there is much to focus on, Glacial thought. They had not been attacked once. They advanced with caution, checking corners, great side rooms and storage containers for Xenos attackers, but there were none. Galliel's team reached the Aqua Shuttle Bay without incident. They found Codicea, IOL, and his team already there. "Greetings, brother," said IOL. "Greetings," said Galliel. "I do not like this." "Neither do I." "Still, the bay is ours. We have taken the objective, though it is not yet secure." The Space Marines were checking over everything as he and IOL conversed. Some watched the entrances. Galliel did not see the moment Marogesh was ripped apart by a pair of gene stealers. He heard the roars of pain. When he turned, he saw the open grate covering above the slaughtered Space Marines and more gene stealers rushing in. He saw one of the Xenos cut down, taken in the neck by bolt fire by Henlak. "Ambush!" he bellowed. Soon the air was filled with alien screeching, the chugs and bangs of weapons fire and sworn oaths. Galliel took one gene stealer with an almighty swing of his heavy thunder hammer, using the momentum to pulverize another with the backswing. Nothing was left of it besides a large puddle of steaming ichor. Garavan stood back to back with Batara, blasting at Tyranids with his shotgun, whilst the Dark Kraken fired burst after burst at the lightning-fast aliens. Saledris was nearly overwhelmed by the monsters until Henlak took a precision shot that removed the head of the gene stealer about to flank the Hawk Lord. Galliel cursed when he saw a pair of Tyranids leap on Zorek's back and drive their impossibly sharp claws in through his plate. The Terminator struggled and thrashed to fling them off. It was a tribute to his indomitable warrior skill that he still had the state of mind to pummel another gene stealer that attacked him from the front. Galliel raced over to the subjugator, but it was too late. The mighty warrior fell to his knees, blood pouring from lacerations all over his body. Gore-coated Tyranids stood atop him. Galliel laid into them. As the battle continued, none noticed the creature sliding out of the Aqua Shuttle behind Henlak. None stopped to consider Auspex readings as Tyranids threatened to tear them limb from limb. Henlak was mid-aim when his head was sliced off. He crumpled to the floor, fingers still squeezing his trigger and sending bolts flying wild across the chamber. In less than a second, the beast who killed him leapt upon Chaplain Caladir. The Iron Raven roared in pain as bone blades pierced his flesh. "Brood Lord," IOL projected into Galliel's mind. "Throne!" The alien was much larger than the other creatures. "Finally, we have drawn out their leader." "Bring down the Brood Lord!" Galliel shouted to his warriors. "Avenge our fallen!" Saledris rushed to the alien, firing a shot from his plasma pistol. The Brood Lord was so fast, it dived out of the way of the searing energy. Its chitin barely even singed by the immense heat. The alien barreled into Saledris. It drove a claw into the Hawk Lord's shoulder, but before it could drive another into the Space Marine, it was racked with shots fired by Rahael. The Brood Lord screeched as shrapnel bit into its eyes and flesh, and it darted away. Teobal of the Crimson Fist followed it, firing bursts from his Infernus heavy bolter and keeping the alien from launching more attacks as it sought to avoid being struck. The Brood Lord bounded along the walls, using the slightest foothold for grip. Soon Teobal could not keep up the pressure on the beast as other gene stealers threatened to butcher him. Free from pressure, the Brood Lord leapt to finish Saledris. Galliel raced to intercept it, bringing round an enormous swing of his heavy thunder hammer that forced the alien to swerve at the last instant, saving Saledris' life. The creature's claws slashed the Hawk Lord's armor, knocking him to the ground, but he was unharmed. "Face me, vile creature!" Galliel said. The alien launched a flurry of attacks. Galliel parried some with the haft of his hammer and ducked others. His actions were not quick enough to ensure he completely missed all of the creature's blows. His armor was scratched deeply again and again, but he did not bleed yet. He knew he could not best the creature, however, as much as he hated that fact. Though the Brood Lord bled, it was not enough to weaken it. It took the intervention of IOL to save Galliel. The former penitent blade, with an incredible display of psychic power, snapped one of the alien's arms just as the creature went to drive it through Galliel's torso. That gave the opening the Deathwatch Sergeant needed. He drove the head of his hammer into the alien's torso as the Broodlord's momentum broke off its own arm completely. The powerful thrust of the hammer forced the alien back. Glacial pressed the attack, and IOL joined him, his force sword alive with Viridian energy. Together, they hammered at the beast and drove it against the wall. It launched a frenzied attack, desperate to cut its way free. In its haste, IOL cut off one of its legs at the knee with a vicious swing of his sword. The Broodlord fell to the floor. Before it landed, Glacial brought his heavy thunder hammer down on its head. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Flick me a super thanks if you are feeling bountiful. And most importantly of all, no matter what you do today, do make some time for fun. Toodaloo.